In the previous section, we looked at CSS briefly, and right now we're going to quickly look at JavaScript, the joy of JavaScript. If you have Chrome installed or IE or whatever, you can go to your right-hand corner here and click that little icon, the menu icon, and go to More Tools, followed by Developer Tools. You'll notice an interesting panel that shows up. The first panel or tab has elements in it, and whenever I mouse over, I'll see a bunch of things getting highlighted depending on the section you choose. Now this is just the HTML view. The next is a network view, and here we can see or track the resources as they come in, usually in terms of time. The style sheet loaded in 3 milliseconds, the actual HTML loaded in 4 milliseconds, and a bunch of stuff. So that's what happens here. When you click the sources tab, you'll see a bunch of things that show up when you have a website. You can see that. Next is a timeline, which also captures whatever gets loaded, and this is mostly for JavaScript captures. Another thing that you can tend to see is called profiles window. Now with the profiles window, you can record how things get loaded over time, how people work with your application, and perhaps you can optimize how your app works. Now the tab that we can look at is the resources tab, and I will stop that here. I'm going to go to resources. You'll see that there are some resources that we can look at. There are a few things here. When I scroll towards the left, you can see frames. Frames usually just traps some pages, and you can display the content on the right. And there's other things like web SQL, local storage. Local storage can allow you to store stuff temporarily on your browser. Things like session storage, which keeps track of sessions on your page, and just a bunch of stuff. But anyways, you'll be working mostly with the console. The console is one way we can quickly write a bunch of JavaScript. Now, what is JavaScript? JavaScript is a programming language that specifically runs on the web, on a web browser. And let's do a bunch of stuff. With JavaScript, you can do mathematics. You can perform operations like addition operations, say 1 plus 1, and notice the value that we got as a result, 2. We can multiply things together. Notice that. We can divide stuff. Notice that. And we can find division remainders using a modulo operator. So say 6 divided by 4. Whenever you divide 6 by 4, it doesn't divide evenly. It will leave behind a remainder, the value 2, because 4 goes into 6 once and leaves something. Let's say a 2. So why is JavaScript useful? What are you gonna use it for? We can get hacking. So let's use the document object, which is a native object inside the browser window, to write something. Hello world. Notice everything was wiped clean, meaning our previous stuff is just disappeared. You can use JavaScript to pick up elements. You do remember that we labeled some things. So for example, when I just inspect that, so our section was labeled bio. When I run over to our console, and I can use document to get an element by its class name, or a bunch of elements by its class name. So let's see what happens. Notice that I get a return of output in here. I could do a bunch of stuff to those elements. I could remove the element. I could add a bunch of listeners. You'll see concepts such as listeners. What are listeners? A listener is some kind of object on a browser, which when something occurs, it could be a click, where you just click something, or when you mouse over and something does occur. That happens through what we call event listeners, and they are pretty useful for this kind of thing. So JavaScript has a bunch of other constructs that are very important. They're known as data structures. And one good data structure we should look at is the array. But before that, let me introduce the concept behind variables. A variable stores something. Now, my first name is Victor. I could store Victor, the value Victor, inside a name that I can then call later in my code. So if I try to call it, notice that it gets output here. I could use the last name of Rambo. And when I just type last name, save there. A common thing that many JavaScript developers will use is the console log. We show log answers using console log, and we do that by that. So one cool caveat here is everything we type in JavaScript, especially if it's a line that does something, ends with a semicolon, except for a few cases, such as conditional statements, which you'll see shortly. And we have quickly delved into the world of JavaScript. One small thing we can do is create that data structure I promised. Perhaps a list of edges or an array of edges, 1, 3, 5, perhaps 20. And when I log that, I'll get that returned. Data structures can be used to do a bunch of things. For example, if you have a shopping list, you can store the bunch of items that you want to buy inside of a list. Sorry, inside of an array. So let's take a look at that. Shopping list. I might want to buy tomatoes, apples, perhaps oranges, and later on go through my shopping list and be able to see a bunch of stuff that I have prior to buying. The things in an array can be accessed using what we call an index. The index basically maps or labels the positions of each of these elements. Tomato, which to a human being is in the first position of this list, to a computer is in the 0th position in the list. All counting in most of computing starts at 0. And this is how we would access the first item, or to a computer, the 0th item. If we want to access the second item, if you guessed 1, you're right, we use 1. And if you want to access the third item, you'd use 2. So for every number of item that you want to access, just subtract 1 from it. Yep. So thank you for watching this quick primer to JavaScript. In the next section, we shall introduce or include JavaScript in our HTML. Thank you.